Hello and welcome to a Beast PC Opinions video. If you look across the internet lately to choose a new CPU for a build, you'll not find a single video, article, or comment recommending Intel. As a result, AMD's processors are super popular and motherboard prices are shooting up, and the CPUs are hard to acquire. What did Intel do to get to this place, where their products are completely uncompetitive? In this video, we'll talk about Intel's incompetence in the custom gaming desktop building market. There's something important to clear up first. Intel's 14nm plus process isn't really too far behind AMD on TSMC's 7nm. For example, in certain tests, the new i5-10600 and the Ryzen 5 3600 are very closely matched in performance, but also in power draw, showing that their 14nm is still competitively efficient on the locked processors. As of now, Intel's IPC on all of the Lake processors isn't that much worse than AMD, and their clock speeds on the K SKUs can go way higher. It's still not a complete loss for Intel in the 4, 6, and 8 core desktop segment. So if performance and under certain circumstances, power draw isn't the issue, what is? Obviously, the main problem is cost. As of late July 2020, an i5-10500 goes for about $200. Meanwhile, the ever-popular super cliché Ryzen 5 3600 goes for $155. And this is one of the best cases for Intel in the mainstream segment. The 10600 and the 10600K go for even more money. The low-level i5 is literally 30% more expensive than in the best-case scenario. Although it features integrated graphics over the Ryzen, it's completely locked down, meaning no overclocking to take advantage of the mature and overclock-ready silicon, and it technically doesn't support memory over 2666 MHz, which is still a rather large disadvantage. Speaking of price, Intel's prices never come down. There are almost no discounts. In fact, as of now in late July 2020, Intel's 10th gen processors have been released for over 2 months. Yet in every retailer that I've checked, 9th gen processor prices are remaining largely the same as before, perhaps with a 10%, 20% discount here or there. Meanwhile, on AMD, when a new generation drops, the previous's price drops heavily. Upon release of Ryzen 3rd gen, the price of a 2700X dropped from its already discounted sale price of $200 down to $130 at certain retailers. Although due to COVID-19 and AMD stopping production, prices have gone up again. AMD is just more enticing at budget price points, especially for creators and professionals who can get 9700K level of multi-core performance at almost 1/3 the price. Intel's motherboards are surprisingly not always more expensive than AM4 though. In fact, due to the coronavirus pandemic, I'd argue that it's easier to find a low-end LGA board for a cheaper price than an AM4 board, simply because AM4 is super hyped and its supply is constrained as of the pandemic. However, Intel does lock their motherboard's features. Non-Z boards cannot overclock the CPU, they cannot overclock memory, they really hamper the performance. In the face of AMD, even decent B350 boards will overclock a Ryzen 9 3950X, and those boards were $50 new and the processor $750. However, if you look at the bigger picture, Intel is still way more expensive. Not only is the CPU more expensive, they come with dinky little coolers, if they even come with them. The K processors don't. Meanwhile, on AMD, the 2700X we has as an example here came with a Wraith Prism, capable of handling the processor just fine at stock without being too noisy, and it had free RGB. All on a $130 processor, new. It even handled the 2700X at PBO with the motherboard reported 250 watts of power draw. especially with Intel's scary looking power consumption with the unlocked 10th gen processors. You'll need to buy a really beefy cooler, and these run for at least $50 if you want to do any sort of overclocking. This pulls apart the already large price gap between the two platforms. And if you want the best game performance, it's difficult to even recommend used Intel processors over new Ryzen ones. Let's take a look at used prices on eBay. The 9700K pretty much hasn't come down in price since release. The 8700K is over $250 still, while a similar performing Ryzen 5 3600 is just $150, 40% off. Even more embarrassingly, the 7700K is still over $180, same with the 6700K, even the 4790K, which doesn't even use modern DDR4 memory. You can buy a new processor with better performance, more cores, for less money than a used Intel processor. And to compare more evenly against the Ryzen 3100 or 3300X, which never seem to be in stock, with similar performance, the Intel quad cores cost 60 to 80% more. It's simply uncanny. Many have said before us, there are no bad products, only bad prices. As we demonstrated earlier, the products aren't even bad, in fact they are quite competitive. Just Intel's high prices for CPUs, high prices for good motherboards, and high prices for aftermarket coolers completely throw whatever advantages they have out the window. Of course they're better at gaming than Ryzen, by up to 20% with a 2080 Ti. It also costs over 20% more. And you can use the money you save on Ryzen for a better GPU, which will absolutely wreck an Intel build at the exact same price point, especially if you're on a budget. At this point, there are only 2 or 3 reasons in my opinion to buy Intel, assuming you can easily afford it. 1, uniqueness. I said in this video that the Ryzen 5 3600 is cliché. Every new PC builder and their mom is using one. If you want to go down the path less taken and do something unique, you can buy Intel. Obviously, this isn't really a good reason at all, but at least it counts. Second is the joy of overclocking. While AMD processors may be faster sometimes, overclocking on Intel is still much more fun, and seeing a high clock speed is very nice. CPU frequency, memory frequency, daily use frequency, Intel has the lead here. For some of us, just seeing a higher number or higher single core benchmark score is pretty nice and pretty fun. And of course, it's technically better for gaming. One more thing, buying a new Intel processor and motherboard is actually quite a decent investment, since prices don't come down. The 7700K was $300 new, and now it's still $200. The CPU only lost 30 to 40% price in 3 years, versus on AMD parts like the 1700, you lose quite a bit more. These reasons are why your very own Beast PC creators use a 9600K sometimes for benchmarks. We overclock the heck out of it, we overclock the memory, all because it's fun and I paid for the processor, I'm going to use the whole processor. And it's a really good CPU for testing game performance. However, it was not cheap. You gamers out there are not us. You're not content creators. Go save your money and buy a better GPU instead. Of course, Intel doesn't care what you buy or what we say. Their sales are not in consumer custom-built desktops. Apple, the giant that sells MacBooks on every college campus in America and iMacs for creators, only makes up 4% of Intel CPU orders. Custom PC builders is a niche, and we're not even going to get close. However, Intel is losing its grip on laptops and servers where they've always dominated and where they've always made the most money. And in their marketing, they'll always find a great way to spin things to make themselves look better, truthful or not. Their real-world performance is a bunch of BS. It's evident that they don't care, given how bad their prices are and how little they've innovated. losing customers on such a niche platform doesn't really affect them. Well, that's about all we have to rant about for today. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please leave a like and please consider subscribing. See you next time.